Good morning and welcome to the Leadership and Insurance Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bond, and I'm very lucky to be joined by Sam White, who, of many things, is founder of an insurtech business called Stella Insurance. Sam, good morning.
Good morning. I'm not sure if I'd describe it as very lucky. Could go either way, Alex.
Well, look, we've already had a kind of feisty conversation already, so I'm looking forward to this one. So it's going to be fun. But before we kind of dive in, it'd be great to get your kind of explanation of what specifically Stella Insurance does.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, obviously, I've had quite a few insurance businesses over the years. Since I decided to set up my first company in and around this sector when I was 24. So, and I'm obviously very old now, as we discussed, not capable of staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning anymore, although I do try and then fail miserably the next day.
Yeah, you and me both.
So I've had a lot of experience with the insurance sector, starting out from claims, then moving into MGA territory, more recently set up a broker in the UK. And I hate to say it, and I'm sure I'll be lambasted, but we are a very, very male industry. And it is what it is. When I started out my career 20 odd years ago, it was even more so. I've got loads of really good male business associates, friends in the industry. But I notice more and more as I get older what's missing from a female perspective. It's hard to see something through somebody else's eyes, isn't it? Someone else's shoes is always really tricky. And if you look at the world in general, the default position is male, just because over the course of history, men have tended to be the people that were in control, building the products, designing things. And insurance is no different to that. There's a fantastic book that I read recently, and I got the whole team at Stella to read it as well, which is, it's called Invisible Women, The Truth About Data Bias. And at the time we chatted, we chatted through some of the stuff, and it was a real eye-opener for me as well, in terms of things that you wouldn't think had a gender associated with them, but by default they have. So, a lot of medicines have been designed, tested on men, and therefore the sort of difference in the hormone balances with women mean that they're not as effective. Mm-hmm. Designed for the male torso. All of these things they might not be badged as a male product, but they've been designed by men with men in mind, and as a result, they've ended up male. So I started to kind of get this idea probably back in 2016 initially of what would an insurance product look like if you were to start it from a blank sheet of paper from a female perspective. Mm-hmm. Weirdly, I went over to Australia at the time looking at business opportunities, and I started to formulate this business plan, and Australia seemed like the best place to start it, partly because they don't have the same gender directive rules. So, from a pricing viewpoint, I'm able to price women appropriately, and by that I mean charge them less for motor insurance because they're generally safer drivers. Mm-hmm. But also just because the sort of enthusiasm over there, I got investment a lot easier than I have done in the past in the UK. There was a really sort of special partnership deal that I did with a media company, so everything kind of came together to be able to do it. But Stella is a motor insurance direct brand that's been designed for the female audience, that is also a sort of a business that is very fundamentally embedded in being supportive of other women as well. So we do, for instance, give $5 from every policy to Women and Girls Emergency Centre, which is a charity that supports domestic abuse victims. So it's that whole kind of holistic, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to bake those values in from the start, right? And it's very difficult to get them in at a later stage. I had a very frank exchange with a branding company and looking at some rebranding for my business, and they were going, "Oh, we help you design a mission statement." I was like, "I don't think you can design that. I think it's you've got to ask the team about what do they believe and think about these things, rather than, you can't sort of dictate the values of a business. You've got to kind of build them in, and that's who do you hire, how do you hire, what are the things you care about. But meaningful action is a thing, like there's no point you making it for women and there's no meaningful action. So I think those things like, $5 in every policy are super important. But you did a big download there, so I need to
sorry, I would
no, that's awesome. One of the things I wanted to pick on is, firstly, all the best people started in claims.
Of course. Yeah.
I do have a belief in that, though, because I think that's the product. You see the end result. If you start there,
it's the pain point as well. It's a big pain point, and continues to be so.
Because where the battle's being fought in insurtech, particularly on the B2C side, it's actually claims. It's what everyone's talking about. When people talk about Lemonade, they talk about the ease of use, the claims process. That's what they're talking about. So it's it's been a trite phrase I've used a lot because I used to specialize in claims recruitment. So I always said the best people worked in claims, but it's something that I kind of fundamentally think has been overlooked. And I think it's interesting that a lot of the insurtechs, that's where they're focusing their time. That's where they're kind of spending the time. Whereas, it used to be this kind of joke within insurance. Like you never saw people that worked in the claims team on the board. You never saw.
Yeah. They don't put the money into it. The salaries aren't reflective in claims as they are in the front end. That's the underwriting and sales bit is the sexy bit of insurance. If there is a sexy bit of insurance.
Yeah. No, insurance is very sexy. We've covered that before. And I wanted to talk about the Australian regulatory landscape, because this is obviously something that I wasn't as clued up on before we spoke. Because of what you're allowed to do in Australia, how are you going to adapt to that as you sort of grow outside of the Australian territory? How are you going to kind of adapt the business?
So great question. And as you might have expected, I have already researched the sort of rules around this. So the thing that's interesting for me is there's lots of products that are gender specific. You've got Gillette razors for men, you've got Dove deodorant for women, you've got Tampax, you've got, and then there's the subtler element of, cars that are specifically marketed towards a female audience or a male audience. So, this isn't something that's unusual in the marketing world, that you might kind of focus your attention on a particular target segment. Yes. And it's becoming more and more specific. So I find media, brand, and that kind of micro segmentation really interesting in how it also corresponds to underwriting. That's what we do with underwriting. We very specifically say this is the group of individuals that we want to attract. And, in an absolute utopia, your marketing fits with your underwriting profile and your pricing, and hey presto, you get what you want. Now, the rules around the gender directive in the UK is that I'm not allowed to use gender as a pricing metric. So, which frankly, I do take great umbrage with, because, whether we like it or not, insurance is fundamentally discriminatory. I can discriminate against you because of where you live. I can discriminate against you because your income is lower than the next person's. I can discriminate against you because your credit score is poor, but I'm not allowed to use gender as a rating factor when we know that women generally do produce a better loss ratio result than anything else. But it is what it is. Rob decided it was a good idea. And it was a law that was put in, so it is where it is. But that doesn't stop me from being very clear about who I am as a brand, and putting that message out to the general public and saying, this is who I am. This is where I stand. And I did a podcast recently with a lady called Cindy Gallop, who's quite controversial, based in New York. She's actually got a business called Make Love Not Porn, which is challenging the sort of incumbents in that industry. And it's actually quite fascinating, because obviously there isn't a more misogynistic environment. I mean, financial services may be very male dominated, but if you really want, misogyny, that's where you go. And she said to me on the podcast, be your own filter. And she said, by that, what I mean is be incredibly clear about who you are and what you want. And the people that you don't want will naturally disperse. And so I think that's the thing for us with Stella. We absolutely insure men, welcome them, in fact, but they are coming on board knowing that the product wasn't designed for them. Now, if you would like a female experience, if you would like a female brand that is looking at things from a female perspective, then absolutely come to us.
Yeah.
If that doesn't appeal to you, by all means, go to Hastings or Admiral or Churchill or wherever the hell you want to go. But I don't think there's anything wrong at all in us being quite clear in our intentions and saying, this is what we've designed it for, because there's so many other things that haven't been designed with women in mind at all.
Yeah, that's really, I think that's a really important point, that you sort of you're not saying people can't. It's just it's created for a certain audience, but that might resonate with you as a man. You might want that product for that reason. I'm pretty sure my girlfriend read that Invisible Women data.
Did she give you a really hard time all week? Like,
basically,
patriarchy.
Yeah, she basically was occasionally going, this is ridiculous. Even the kitchen's designed for you. And it was all about like shelving height and things like that.
Yes, absolutely.
Like just access points. And, I'm a 6'1" man, and I'm thinking, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. The other thing was the amount of space allocated to toilets for men and women, because of course men can use urinals. So actually you're catering for a much larger volume of men, which is why there's always so many queues in female toilets. But I'm not, contrary to popular opinion, I am absolutely not a man hater. I like I say, actually my sort of foundation relationship, interestingly, my strongest relationship was with my dad. I had a relationship with my mum for a variety of different reasons, but that doesn't mean that I can't call out where, one of the reasons I've got the confidence that I've got is that my dad was an incredibly forward-thinking guy. He's probably the biggest feminist that I know. He calls out more instances of misogyny than I do. That gives me the ability to go out in the world and be quite solid on my grounds to say, this isn't an equal playing field right now, but it doesn't mean it can't be. Say that my experience is most of the men that I know, when I've shown them the ad campaigns and told them what we're doing and how they love it. They're like, absolutely go for it. Fantastic. For me, it's only people with a degree of insecurity about where they stand in the world that get threatened by that sort of thing. And, I'm quite happy to have the debate with those individuals.
I love that. I want to be in the room for that one. I want to kind of talk about it in practical terms. So, it's motor insurance designed for women by women, created by women, and that's been a big part of the messaging. On practical terms, what needs to be different? What is it about the product that is different, and how does it need to look different?
So, I mean, there's loads more to do, would be where I started from. And what I've said to the team is, let's go deeper and deeper and deeper into what we can do. But what we did in the initial instance, because we had the partnership with the media company, we actually commissioned a study of women to say, okay, what do you understand about insurance now? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? And some of these things may well be true for men as well. It's just that we didn't ask them. We asked a female audience. They didn't understand the policy wording. It's probably true of most people. It's far too overcomplicated. It doesn't simplify what's being offered in a way that they can understand. So we work very hard on making sure that our communication is straightforward and in human terms and not in insurance speak. They didn't like how many questions they were asked from an insurance quote perspective. So, and let's face it, there are a lot of organisations, and certainly this was true in Australia, that use the quote process as a data collection tool. And so questions that they don't necessarily need to know the answer to, but I might want to know it in the future from an underwriting viewpoint, so I'm going to stick the question in there. So we cut out all of the questions that we didn't need. And we gave them a quick quote option that took 40 seconds to get a pretty clear indication of what the price was going to be, so that if we weren't even in the ballpark, they could move on to the next provider without too much trouble. The policy wording generally around insurance excludes events that are caused by family members. So if your vehicle was damaged by your partner, you wouldn't be insured for it because that was, domestic event or whatever. We removed that clause because we recognised that would unfairly disadvantage women that were victims of domestic violence, and that's a kind of core cause that we wanted to get behind. We cover much more contents because women's handbags are often expensive, and they often have more expensive items in them than men do. So we look very closely at what the contents policy would look like around there. We've done a number of promotions where we've included breakdown because that was the biggest thing that women were concerned about. But I think, one of the main sort of stalwarts of this is how we talk to our customers.
Yeah.
So, the brand is, I think, and obviously I'm going to say that, but I do think it's incredibly different to what you see out there. If you look at our Instagram or Facebook or anything, we're fun and edgy, but we're looking to educate women around the topics that they've told us they're interested in. So we've got Stella Expert series. So we've got an ex-female race car driver that talks about what you need to watch out for when you're buying a vehicle and gives good tips on that. I've done a series on setting up your own business as a woman, and again, just very punchy 5 sort of levels of tips of this is what you need to be mindful of, and that sort of ongoing newsletter communication. This is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. This is what to watch out for. We even tell them how to save money on the motor insurance. We're very transparent. You need to look at this. Although this is the right way of kind of purchasing your policy to get the best outcome for you. So and there's loads more we can do. So I'm currently in talks with a specialist insurer to design a product that's never existed before that will specifically benefit women, that will just automatically include in the policy. And for me, it's about building on that to kind of go, okay, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? How can we deliver on our promise, which is to be by women for women? Yeah,
and it's such a nuanced area as well, because of some of the things I instantly thought to, I was like, well, does that impact on breakdown cover? And even the breakdown cover you get in the UK, the idea that it might prioritise women on their own,
exactly,
things like that. But those are the more obvious ones, I think. But the kind of more subtlety is really interesting. I hadn't thought about handbags. My partner's life is in her handbag, and 90% of her valuable items are probably in that bag.
In the handbag. Yeah.
Whereas if you stole my car, you'd have nothing in it apart from.
But men tend to carry stuff in their pockets.
Exactly. Yeah.
And they can take it out of the car. Yeah. So. In terms of the limits on that, it's different. And, I think once you start to really delve into the consumer base that you're interested in appealing to, you can find some real kind of nuggets of special, benefits that aren't standard in insurance. And I think generally in insurance, we don't do this particularly well. We don't really think from a consumer viewpoint. We've generally thought from a policy perspective. Look at the business models. They're about getting to scale, getting profit, and getting a multiple on that profit. And that's the name of the game. How can I get to a segment of business that's going to be profitable and do loads of that so that I can grow my business? And I've got that. And that's all fantastic. But if you look at other sectors of the market, the sophistication around building that brand that genuinely is giving customers something that they haven't had previously or that they didn't even know that they wanted.
Yeah.
Uber's a great example, of a business model that has created a completely new space. I think we that's what's exciting to me in insurance. That's what we can do. And when I'm looking at designing new products in this market, what I find really exciting about it is thinking about what problems we're trying to solve for in the future. And what actually are people wanting to protect or have some security around, rather than just, I'm going to sell a home insurance policy and it's the same home insurance policy that everybody else has always sold and that exists in the market. You know, that it does, it excites me. I like sitting there and thinking about, you know.
But the theme that I think comes back from all this is that the key to success in this is engagement, you know, and I think traditionally insurance companies have been very bad at engaging with the actual end consumer. I use a perfect example of when I had health insurance. I had to claim on it. I was going through, thankfully, it was a health scare, but I was perfectly fine. But going through that process was so, the claims process was so antiquated and awful that as soon as my policy ended, I left and went to another provider. But there was no feedback loop. I left and there was no contact, there was no reach out, there was no anything. I thought, that's fascinating, because I know it's only one policy, it's a small policy, but it's indicative of the care or lack of care. Because it would have been a very easy thing to say, what didn't you like? I didn't like that it was very manual. I had to phone up quite a lot. I wanted to just have it all on an app. Why can't it all be on an app?
Exactly.
It's very easy to solve. Okay, I wanted to switch gears, to give everyone some kind of background. You and I have communicated before. We were talking about our flight series, Female Leaders in Insurance Technology series. It's my shameless plug. It starts next year, 2022. You were one of the first people I reached out to because, I've seen some of the stuff that you've done in the media. I love the sort of personal brand you've got. But your history, I mean, you touched on at the top, you've had multiple insurance businesses with little outside investment. But I know that when we talked, it wasn't necessarily through choice.
Not choice, yeah.
So how have you found raising money? You said you've raised money successfully in Australia in the current environment. What's been your experience?
Yeah, and, I caveat this with, I've got a lot of male founder friends as well, and it's tough, full stop. Raising money is hard. I get that. And particularly, it's hard if you don't fit in a very small box of, individuals that seem to just pass money around amongst themselves. And we all know how that game sits. But I am a great believer. If you can have a personal experience, you can have a subjective experience, and it can come your whole viewpoint. But I think it's important, if you have a personal experience and you think a certain way, to step back and have a look at the stats and say, is that generally supported by the statistics? And when I started out my business, I could not get any support at all. My bank manager was actually the most patronizing human being I have ever had the misfortune to have a conversation with. And look, I was 24. And it was my first business, but I went in to ask for a relatively modest loan, and in the most patronizing manner he could possibly drum up, he explained the concept of gearing to me, which was, I could lend you the 40,000 a month, but you would need 40,000 in a bank to correspond against that, because we'd need the security against it. And I'm like, why would I borrow 40,000 off you if I've had to put 40,000 in the bank over there, and then I'm paying you the interest? Like, that makes no sense to me. He removed my personal overdraft that I'd used very responsibly for a number of years previously. And it was just a really awful experience. And it wasn't until I actually asked my dad to pretend he was in the business. I said, look, Dad, I'll be honest, I just think they need to see an old white dude sat next to me in the chair, and that's going to kind of get it over the edge. And I brought him into the bank, and literally they agreed the overdraft. And he didn't give any extra security or anything else. And the bank manager my dad nearly punched him. But bear in mind, he's a bigger feminist than I am. I had to kind of hold his hand, like, we're here for a purpose. Just smile and nod. And he turned around to my dad and said, oh, the power behind the throne. And
wow.
It was like, okay, right. But that was, that was my initial experience. And I have to say, it didn't really get any better. Every time I engaged, with people from a financial background, it was a horrid time. And then during COVID, we banked with Barclays Bank. Don't mind saying it because I ranted at them horrendously. They were so unsupportive because obviously, a lot of my UK businesses were dependent on motor claims, and we stopped driving. And so the claims completely stopped happening. Yeah. And so, I'm not backed by anybody else. I haven't got private equity. I haven't got money in the bank, but I've got a track record of running profitable businesses for 20 odd years and always finding solutions. And they messed me about. They took absolutely ages to come back to tell me that they were not going to give us any support whatsoever. And I had friends that were with NatWest at the time who seemed to take a completely different tack. They were actually really supportive of their existing customers, but of course weren't taking any new customers on at that point. So we were really caught between a rock and a hard place because our existing bank wouldn't support. And then I was talking to other people that were with them, and they were men. And, you can't help but go, well, if I know that a penny in every pound goes to female founders on a general basis, is it reasonable to assume there's a level of bias and misogyny in the whole process that I might kind of hit up against? And, they were successful in getting CBILS loans and CBILS support. But I finally managed to get in front of a company called Boost, who were what's known as a second tier CBILS lender. So they're a bit more expensive, but they had a very diverse board. They also were passionate about the North, which is another issue. Like the North versus the South from a funding viewpoint could be really challenging. And we went through all the numbers with them, and it's the same bloody numbers, right? So I've got a bank that's been with me for years, that knows me, that's supposed to be kind of making bigger risks because they've got more support from the government. And then I've got these guys that don't know me from Adam looking at exactly the same numbers. Anyway, they came good. It was a huge support, made a massive business difference to the business, and the group's absolutely fine. It just needed a bit of support, but it does make me a little nervous when looking at a new project to say, okay, is it going to be a complete balanced position when I'm going out for this, or is it going to be a challenge? And I didn't find that in Australia. The first people that I went and sat down with and talked to wanted in, and we did a deal, and it's been great, and they've been great investor partners. So yeah, I'm an optimist, so I'm hopeful that I will find my way to the right home in any set of circumstance. But I wonder how much easier it would be if I wasn't female and northern.
Well, I wanted to say, something you brought to my attention was some of the research that's been done on the sort of the raising experience, the investment round experience and trying to raise capital. Talk to me about that, the thing you mentioned about questioning.
Oh, the prevention, yeah. So, I mean, I am the sort of person that because I am relentless and I'm really optimistic. If something isn't happening, I want to know why, and I want to garner opinion and find the facts out. So when I was really struggling with the funding, I went on a bit of a rampage, aside from tracking down the chairman of Barclays, who was, to be fair, he actually did respond to me, and he seems like a decent enough guy. I just say that his infrastructure behind him is not what it should be. But I went online and I found this woman who I think she'd done a TEDx talk on it. She found a female founder had struggled, and she's a researcher, so she took a scientific approach to it. So she went to I think it was in the InsurTech, California, and there's thousands of pitches that go on there, thousands of investors, thousands of people looking for money going in and pitching, male and female. And she analysed all of the videos. I mean, God help her, and had a them and went through the questions and what have you. And the interesting thing that came out of it was that there are prevention questions and promotion questions. So a prevention question is an investor saying to you, what happens if you lose your capacity? What happens if you lose your biggest customer? Like, what happens if this regulatory change comes in? And a promotion question is, where else could you take this product? Where else could you sell within, this market sector? Anything that provokes a kind of expanding the business out, promotion question. And what she found is that if you were asked a promotion or promotion questions generally, you were 17 times more likely to get funding. 17 times more likely to get funding. And so then what she did was she had a look at the pitches, and they were broadly, whether they were male or female, they were broadly the same in the way that they stacked it out. Everybody goes to the same place to learn how to present a pitch. They pitched very similarly. But what she found was that the female founders were asked, on average, 65% prevention questions, and the male founders were asked, on average, 65% promotion questions. Mm-hmm. And, this is one take on it. And I get she's gone out and she's done it, but she will be subjected to her own degree. But what I find really interesting about that is it does resonate with my own experience and the experience that I've spoken to other women about of feeling, and this happens in corporate environments as well, overly challenged, overly questioned on things that they believe, they're pretty solid on. And people talk about mansplaining or whatever, but I think it comes down to confidence. And I think there is still an inherent, whether they accept it or not, unconscious bias that men do not feel as much confidence in a female in charge as they do in a man. And if you're lacking in confidence around something, what are you going to do? You're going to ask negative questions because you're feeling a certain kind of way. And so you're trying to validate that feeling, because that's what we do as human beings. I think until we really start to challenge some of this stuff and we really start to question it. I mean, I love the idea of blind pitches, from an investment viewpoint, because it's still so subjective around people's personal biases, whether they like it or not. The amount of times I hear people saying we back the team. And like, what does that mean? Like, you don't know these individuals. They could be alcoholic, drug addicts, like complete car crashes on the day and look the part and, all right, okay. So it's very nebulous concepts in an area where there's a lot of money being deployed. And there should be more, I think there should be more analysis of why, what, and who in that decision making.
I couldn't agree more. And I think the thing that resonates with me as you're saying this is that I always think of pitching and raising capital the same as it's an interview process, right? So in my world of recruitment, it's an interview process. And I had an exchange with someone on LinkedIn where I put this thing about, are you over interviewing? And I was discussing it, and it had been born out of a real world example where, I'd had someone that had interviewed with every single member of the business, and they were then looking for external interviews. Validation, yeah. And I was like, it's probably a no then, right? Or you just need to take some responsibility. So we're having a discussion around that. And this person said, well, I wouldn't trust someone if they made a decision after 3 hours. I'd want to meet with them more. And I was like, because we don't bring any science and rigor to interviewing. Like, the amount of people I've met client side that have actually done any training on how to genuinely conduct an interview of caliber, which is robust and repeatable and is evidenced, and competency based is the main way of doing it. Statistically, it's the best way. Having a resume or a CV and a competency based interview is the most effective way, predictor of job performance outside of watching someone do that job. But we can't do that. We can't get someone in and go, right, can you be COO for a week and we'll see how you get on. But people don't do the training. And so you've got baked in bias, and people don't want to do competency interviews because they feel awkward. It's not natural. And I do think there's a lot of ego in that. People go, because people like to think they're a really good judge of character. They
Yes,
go,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
a
yeah,
skill we
yeah.
hold dear. I mean, people
Yeah.
go, oh, I know, I just know.
Yeah, it's such nonsense. So have you read Talking to Strangers? Gladwell.
I haven't, no.
You have to read it, because he absolutely obliterates exactly what you're talking about. It is, and he says it doesn't matter whether it's a high court judge or an FBI agent or a police officer. We are not good at it. We think we're good at it. We think our gut instincts are so, on point and blah, blah, blah. But effectively, all we do is confirm our own biases. We go about our life kind of going, this feeling, what can I do to validate these feelings? And then after we validate them, we're like, see, told you.
Yeah.
I was right about that. And we do it with everything. We do it with relationships. I mean, psychology is fascinating to me. Fascinating. I've just replaced myself as CEO in the business, and I have replaced myself with effectively a psychologist. So this guy has been doing one-on-one coaching with me and with the team for 18 months. It's not a complete wild card. He has got some previous insurance experience. Mm-hmm. My view is creating psychologically healthy environments to get the best outcome at work. I want, and I've said this for many years, and, I think we have done a good job in lots of sets of circumstances. I mean, the very fact that we managed to survive through the absolute shitstorm that was last year, COVID, finance, and blah, blah, blah. And everybody that comes into the business says the same thing. The resilience, the kind of, okay, how can we find a solution to this is very strong, but we could be a lot better. And the thing for me is, how do you get a group of individuals to play as a team instead of those individual kind of empire building roles that we create with a hierarchical structure? And somebody whose main focus from a psychology viewpoint has been group dynamics and healthy group psychology, I think will enable the talent that we've already got in the business for new talent to be effective.
Yeah, no, I could see that. It's at the end of the day, you hire the practitioners that are good at their individual roles and expertise.
Exactly.
It's really then about, as long as you've got a strategic vision, it's about how do you get the team to move in that direction. No, I completely see that. And do you watch Billions? Because I'm just thinking of...
Yeah. So we did say that. So it's been said already.
You've made Wendy CEO.
Basically we made Wendy CEO. I mean, he's definitely been fulfilling that role for the last couple of years. And we joke about it. He genuinely does not talk to me about the stuff that he talks about. And I don't need to know. Like, my thing is, I just want everybody to be fulfilling their full potential. That's all I care about. But the only way that they can really do that is to play as a team. And I look at sports performance, a football team, there isn't any one player on the pitch that's more important than the other. And it only works if they can work out how to pass the ball between each other and score goals. Yeah. And in corporate environments, that isn't how the game is set up to be played. They'll stab each other in the back and clamber over each other to get further up the ladder. I've seen that. I've seen it in my own organization at times where you kind of realize that the psychology or the dynamics is not where it should be. But I'm super excited to see how it plays out. That's a hell of an experiment. And but I think you've got to take these chances, because the world's changing so quickly. If we just carry on doing everything that we've always done, we're just going to end up way behind the curve.
I completely agree. It's something I'm fascinated in, and I'd be intrigued to get that individual on. Actually, I might ask you about that later. But
no, absolutely.
One thing that and this is my last probably my last question for you. But obviously, one of the things that drew us together, and I was really intrigued by that, you've got this really strong presence in media in general, but podcasting, article writing, and I think it was off the back of an article actually that I contacted you. I wanted to ask you, do you think that's important in modern entrepreneurship? And do you think it's not determinant of success, but do you think it's something that people need to do now in this era of transparency?
Yeah, so I mean, when you talk about success of businesses, it used to be revenue and EBITDA. Increasingly, I'm seeing money raised and number of followers as a metric, as a genuine metric for businesses. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but it is what it is. The reason I use social media and the media in general and articles and so forth is actually you get different types of business owners, you get different types of CEOs. You get subject matter experts that know their field inside out, and then they set up a business because of that. And they tend to be very inward focused, and that's where their magic comes from a business viewpoint. That's not me. I am a very sort of naturally entrepreneurial individual. I started making money entrepreneurially probably when I was 13, 14. So that's in my DNA. In order to be able to do that, you need to create as many connections and opportunities as possible. So for me, having an online presence and being open to having conversations with people creates opportunities that I wouldn't have if I was just sat looking in my own sphere. And then the thing it does is it creates reference points for me. So I had this situation the other day. There was something I was looking at. I've never done it before. I don't know anything about it, but I'm intrigued. I have a big enough network and a strong enough network to, within 2 or 3 hours, to have the top expert in that area be happy to come on a call with me, have a conversation, and explain it to me in simple terms that I can understand. That is the power of having a public presence for me. And the more you can increase that public presence, then the more people you can draw into that net that you can collaborate with, that you can create energy and outputs. And that's just my strategy. There'd be other CEOs that go, I haven't got time for that. I am focused exactly on this problem within the business and solving it. And that's also totally legitimate. But you have to play to your own strengths and your own kind of passions. And I love people. I love new ideas. Like, I'm constantly talking to people outside of the insurance sector because
we lost you. He said you I've lost your sound actually. You might have come back.
Have I come back now?
Yeah, sorry. You said we can cut that in, but it was you were constantly talking to people outside the insurance sector.
Yeah, because I think you can get new ideas from people outside the insurance sector, and again, the more I can widen my profile, the more likely those people are to talk to me. So it's self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, I'm so on board with that. I mean, even the way I'm looking to grow my business is I'm trying to build my business like a SaaS model, where they have SDRs and client success managers. And I was like, well, why does recruitment not look like that? Because that's what we're doing, is solving recruitment challenges. How we do that is kind of irrespective, but it just doesn't seem to me that the right fits there. So, I mean, that's just on a kind of simple basis. But look, I'm really conscious of our time. So I wanted to kind of bring things up. I always like to end on a kind of open call to arms for you, which is like, what's the next steps for Stella? What would be useful? Should people reach out? Do we want VCs knocking at your door? What?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So people can find me on LinkedIn. Obviously, I'm super noisy on LinkedIn. Stella is world domination plans. So, I do want to launch it in the UK, the States, Canada. We've got a really strong success story in Australia that forms the basis of that. So yes, if you've got a ton of cash, you're not a misogynist, and you're fancy getting behind something that you think could be the next, please do reach out and we can have a conversation and see if there's some synergies there.
Awesome. That's a lovely way to end it. Sam, thank you so much for your time. Absolute pleasure as always. And really appreciate you being a guest.
Thank you for having me on.
You're welcome.